Hey everybody, it is Chris Storch welcoming you to another virtual Q&A for this year's 11th edition of the Chattanooga Film Festival. We've really had the opportunity to bring back a lot of our personal and a lot of our fan favorite filmmakers this year. It's kind of an embarrassment of riches this year with new films by both Ariel Vida and the filmmaker and crew that we're here to talk to tonight, Mr. Graham Skipper, who's honestly been a part of the CFF extended family since pretty much year one. I think we showed Almost Human, and we've been part of each other's like strange careers ever since. Like you were kind enough to let us world premiere Sequence Break here, and it's been really incredible to watch you evolve from being one of our favorite actors to now one of our favorite filmmakers, and to get a chance to talk to you and your crew with. I think your most interesting piece of work yet is really, really great. So I'd love to kick it off to you now.
Chris, thank you. Yes, it is such a pleasure to be back at CFF. You are my family. In the indie horror world, you have to develop a strong familial bond with those that are going to continue to support you and those who you want to support. And CFF has always been that home for me. So thank you for having us, and I'm excited to be here. I'm Graham Skipper. I wrote, directed, and produced this movie, The Lonely Man with the Ghost Machine. I also act in it,
And edited it.
and I edited it. I did, and I sort of catered it. It was a lot.
I wanted to say to Chris and all of the CFF people out there that this is my favorite film festival because it was my first when Graham and I premiered Sequence Break. How long ago was it now, Graham? 7 years ago that we were
7 years,
talking about the other day?
a lifetime ago.
It was a
Was it
lifetime
fucking
ago.
7 years ago? It was the time before for sure.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lost time before. But it was the most fun I'd ever had at a film festival and my first time. And I gotta say, I can't wait to come back.
oh man, so happy to have you guys. So happy to talk about the world of this movie, which I feel like is both an example of like some of the best world building I've seen, and yet one of the smallest worlds that world building takes place in. And each and every one of you obviously play a huge part or are a big piece of that puzzle. And I also have to say, like, the Dilitarian, I think, stands for me as like of all the different, destroyers or eaters of worlds, like the one that I'd really like to like hang out with and grab a beer with. So like hats off to Paul and Christina for just Paul, your incredible voice performance, and Christina, just I love the look of the puppet so much, and it just adds a ton to the film. And I'm curious if that was something that Graham, you had an inkling of what you wanted the Dilitarian to look like from the beginning, or if you guys kind of all came with it up with it together, like as the project went along. And Paul, also how involved you were from the word go on it.
I'll start. I mean, it was definitely a collaborative process for sure. I mean, I think that when I first talked to Christina about it, my, my general thoughts were um, two sort of character inspirations. Well, when I talked to Paul, I gave him Shere Khan from the Jungle Book. I said I sort of am getting a Shere Khan vibe. And then also when I was talking to Christina about it, talking about him being a little bit like the Nothing from the Neverending Story.
Oh my God, you're blowing my mind because these are literally things that are in my notes. Also, like perhaps a hair of like Podos the alien from all the great Treehouse of Horror episodes.
Yes,
Like
yeah, for
just a
sure.
hair of all that. Like I love these, like that these touchstones were in your mind as well.
Yeah, for sure. And another thing that we talked about from the very beginning was that we knew that we didn't have the budget to create something that was hyper realistic, right? And so my feeling was get rid of that idea. We're going to make a puppet. This is going to be a Jim Henson puppet. We know it's a puppet. We are film goers watching this movie, and we know that this is a puppet. But that doesn't detract in any way from what the character is doing, and we're going to let the character sort of speak for itself. So as far as the design goes, I'll let Christina speak to that, and I know that Paul, I mean, Paul and Christina are married, in case you all didn't know. And so I thought it was so cool that the two of them were able to work in sync to create this character together.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we don't have children because we're good. We have a cat. But
we got the Deletarian.
Same policies all around the table here.
Yeah. The things that we create and collaborate on. So yeah, the fact that
Our
she
creature babies.
Yeah, exactly. The creature babies. And yeah.
Yeah, and I would
But yeah,
just
so
oh, sorry. I would just throw in, like, in terms of the design, when we were talking initially, the things that were standing out to me were lots of teeth and looking at a lot of influences of teeth. We also were kind of talking a little bit about wolves at one point, maybe something a little wolfish. And so I was looking at everything from, American Werewolf in London to anglerfish, deep sea anglerfish.
That's so cool. That's awesome. I feel like you
Yeah.
can feel that in there. Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of menace, and the fact that, like, there would just be so many teeth that there's no possible way you could trust it. And then with Paul, because you were here, we live in the same house together, obviously. You were kind of always seeing what was happening as that was getting built. And I'm not sure if you want to talk about if that influenced at all.
well, yeah, I mean, so Graham reached out, and Graham is one of those people that we met in college, and it's sort of like this, like, oh, okay, I want to do stuff with you forever. So like anytime he reaches out, it's like it's already yes, tell me about the project. And so he told me, the breakdown to Deletarian, sent me the script, and I took a chunk, like the big paragraph towards the end, and I kind of like just did it and then put a little noise behind it and sent it to him. And it was just like, okay, yeah, so that's done. That's set. Like we already have that guy. But yeah, and then the one thing that I thought was really interesting is that originally the character was called Deletarian, but then like everybody I think that Graham showed it to was kind of subconsciously or just calling him the Deletarian, and we made that change because there was something interesting about that. That's you never actually. There's a moment where the Deletarian says something like, I'll tell you my name. But then when it actually comes down to it, he says, I am called the Deletarian. So that might just be a title like the master or the doctor. And it's like, no, but what's actually going on? So again, what you talked about, Chris, with the world building, I love a built world and just the idea that like we are seeing a peak of this. But yeah, just so all of that was there with the Deletarian, that he wasn't just, someone in a mask like, well, I'm killing you because I have a machete, like there's so much more going on with it, and just reading the script and like, ooh, just tasty. Just the whole
There's a
thing is
downright
just,
friendliness between you and Wazik, I feel like, and it's
yeah,
because you'll be alone, and to experience the existential crisis of the thing that is itself wiping out
yeah.
everything is just like one of the coolest angles I've seen. And like we're doing a salute to the Twilight Zone this year, and it's been
Oh,
such a
nice.
joy to like find projects that I just feel like live in that spirit and just blow your mind in incredible ways. So that was something that the relationship between those two characters, and Paul, what you brought to the voice, and Christina, again, the look of that puppet, and just to me, if it had been hyper real and not, the way it was, it might not have been as magical as it was. And I have to give you some props too, Ken. I absolutely love the way that you're using black and white and color through the movie, and I'm curious if because it's almost like reverse Wizard of Oz sometimes. Like, you're before you're in Oz, perhaps you're in black and white here, and then the way it switches back and forth, I think, is like to me a thing that I love a lot. And I always hesitate to compare the work of filmmakers to other filmmakers I admire, but like a lot of what David Lynch does that scares me in ways that other filmmakers don't. And films like, for example, Fire Walk with Me, or even that eighth incredible episode of the Twin Peaks Return, where it's so much
Oh,
black and white, and there's just so much unsettling, DNA there. I felt that through and through in your film, and so I really think you guys you fired on all cylinders for me, and for it to be such a tiny group is just unfucking believable. So this is one that like we're particularly excited to lay on the crowd this year. And I have to ask Graham, and maybe you don't want to say this, did I hear a Barbara Crampton voice cameo there? Was that Barbara? You don't have to say if you don't want to.
Might have heard Barbara in there somewhere.
Oh,
Yeah,
might have. That's great.
but I
That
don't
like
know. I don't know.
yeah, I don't
I mean,
either. But if I did hear it, it did warm my heart at the moment that I did or
uh-huh.
did not hear it.
She
So
captures all of our hearts, and I love Barbara very much, and I thank her greatly for what she may or may not have contributed to the film.
And speaking of people who have been contributing, to your films for a long time, I'd love if you and Van would talk a little bit about each other's history too, because you guys go way back. And Van, I'd love to know also from your perspective. Obviously, this is a very different ball game than the score that you created for Sequence Break. How did you approach the score for this film and the kind of spareness of its environment?
Yeah, well, Graham and I go way back. We met in college as well, and Graham was my college roommate. Very intimate beginnings that we shared.
very, very intimate, Van and I.
Incredible.
Yes.
But when Graham had a comedy troupe in college, I was the music guy there. And
Can I ask what the name of your comedy troupe was? Like, not to interrupt you, Van. Can you tell me?
Yeah, you want to tell him, Graham?
The name of the troupe was Fucked.
Incredible. I was hoping for something just like Fucked. So that's great.
It was Fucked, and it was Fucked. And those were some beautiful years. Beautiful years.
They sure were. And when I started scoring movies in the 2010s, Graham's unbelievable first feature, Space Clown, is still one of my favorites I've ever worked on. And then we got to do Sequence Break together, which, as you mentioned, it's quite different than this movie. It's like a Vangelis style synth
100%
game landscape, whereas this movie, Lonely Man, like you said, like the stillness, we wanted to use organic sounds. So I first was like acoustic guitar. Graham also talked about piano. There was a lot of piano in the temp score that he sent me. But what I liked about, it's mostly Graham by himself. There is that stillness and simplicity to the storytelling. And I really wanted to reflect that and not try to overdo the melodrama, so to speak. I wanted to be there when it needed to be supported, but also just hold it,
give it some room to breathe when it needed to.
And not be like, let me just wall to wall do what some kind of Hollywood movie might try to do.
I think that also gives us those moments where Graham makes up his own little songs. And like Graham, that to me is a guy who, like, I work in total isolation in our CFF office / basement pretty much for most of the day. And I'm a guy who makes up a lot of songs as I work. And I was like, man, this is just hitting me right now. So I have to say, I really love that as well. I'm also curious about your character name, Graham, and if there's any significance of the type that I'm thinking with the choice to name it.
Yeah, Wozik comes from one of my favorite plays. It's funny because so many of us here we met in college. Me and Christina and Paul and Van. We all went to college together, and this was, I think that I was drawing a lot from a lot of the art that we were introduced to there. But Wozik comes from this play called Wojciech, which is a very sad play about. The very short Cliff's Notes version would be that it's about a man that is dealing with grief and loss and murder and a whole lot of stuff at once, and it's also a bit confusing, and there are different interpretations of like the order of events that things happen in the play. And so as I was trying to think of the character name, for my character, I wanted to sort of have a play on Wojciech, so I went with Wozik, which is another sort of Slavic kind of name that I found that was in that vein. And then my very favorite musical of all time, and one of the main inspirations for me getting into horror in the first place is the musical Sweeney Todd. And so I've always wanted to name a character Nellie.
I wondered about that as well. That's incredible.
So that is where Nellie came from. And then for the Deletarian, I think that I Googled something like synonyms for synonyms for destruction or something like that, and I came across deleterious, and so I just sort of played with that. But that's where the names came from.
I'm also curious to ask you, Graham, and Paul, really you too. Were you on set with each other, or was the Deletarians dialogue recorded separately? Because the back and forth is just so utterly perfect. And I have to ask almost the same question, Graham, about the device of the tapes. And you speaking to yourself, the timing is just so fucking incredible. Obviously, it's something you agonize over in the editing, but I'd love to know how you approach that from the production standpoint.
Yeah, so all of my stuff with the Deletarian, we recorded ahead of time, and that was Paul's suggestion. And it was sort of where I had been leaning to, but I wasn't exactly sure about the best way to go about it. And then Paul, recommended wisely that we pre-record it. And so he and I literally, I mean, we spent just a number of hours over Zoom, just like this.
Just doing
He's
the
in New York,
script,
I'm in
yeah.
Texas,
Right.
just doing these scenes together. And it helped me a lot as an actor because I was able to sort of figure out what it was scene work, right? Like it was us,
Yeah.
Effectively like doing these scenes together. And so yeah, we pre-recorded all of that. And the stuff with the tapes, that was inspired by, there's a Samuel Beckett play called Crab's Last Tape, that I was just sort of blatantly ripping off. Where
I wondered about that. I wondered about like Silent Hill 2, like if there was some video
Silent
game,
Hill 2. Oh, wow.
so just an element of that is what like, and I love that it made me think of all those things because those are things that are a huge part of me. So I just thought like, that's such a well-used device in your film's case. I really, really thought it worked and was terrific.
Thanks. Yeah,
Yeah, the Silent Hill 2 thing, I got that when I was reading it. That always is very exciting. That's one of my favorite
Oh,
things ever.
same.
Yeah.
Huge experience for me in storytelling of any type. So
yeah,
when anything conjures that feeling, it's special to me.
It's good.
But yeah,
And
actually, so
I'm also,
working with.
oh, go ahead. Sorry, Paul. You go ahead.
No, it's okay. When Graham and I are working together, as a voice actor, sometimes you're just kind of doing your lines, and you'll have somebody reading with you, and it's never really exactly the same. But actually having Graham be Wozik and having, being able to read back and forth, we both discovered stuff like, oh, I wouldn't have thought that would have been read that way. Okay, cool. Let's do this. So that's always, I wish I had been able to be there. But that was the next best thing because we got to, we took turns we didn't think we would. And yeah, and just a couple tiny little changes. I think like we may have like added the word palaver just because like it's such a good fucking word. Like the first time I heard it was in the Dark Tower, the first Dark Tower book.
Oh my God, yeah,
it's the fucking
incredible.
gunslinger, and just every time I get like, you can't just say that word. It's like, okay, Mom, palaver with you later. But when you say it, just that it's one of those words just has such weight to it. Like, and even though I think it just means chit chat, but it's like it sounds so like you don't talk with the devil, you palaver with the devil, and it's just like, ooh, just getting chills. But yeah, so that was great to basically be able to go through the entire thing with Graham and find any little, ooh, yeah, let's try that. That always,
man, really made a meal out of all that dialogue too. And I love to know that there's a little bit of Dark Tower DNA in there. Like I'm one of those people that if I even see a mayhaps written somewhere, I'm like, it just it gives me a little joy in my heart. I also have to say, Graham, like from a performance standpoint, you absolutely lay yourself bare in this movie. I don't know that there is now post Dumb and Dumber was it for a while, but now we have the explosive diarrhea scene here, and I just like I just couldn't help myself but think, man, Graham is really going for it in this world, and so I wanted to give you some props also for like how much of yourself you just went nuts with in this movie. Your performance is great, and that also brings me around to wondering, how long was your actual shoot time?
Thanks. Regarding the shit scene, if there's anything that I want to be remembered for,
of course,
it's that. No, I it's funny. I mean, this movie, we were very blessed with the ability to just to really be let loose and make whatever we wanted to make, which is an incredible rarity, and an incredible gift. And so, to be able to go on set and play in that way and explore in that way, it honestly, it does. I mean, it harkens back to we keep coming back to college, and I want to bring Christina Lind into this too, because obviously she is my one it's me and her, and I when I think of our time in college together, all of us, as with I think a lot of people, it was so much about exploration and about being bold and about making big choices and about trying the things that you were afraid to try. And I think that was really a driving force kind of for me in the movie, and something that we all discussed when we were coming together about making it. And you know when I was trying to think of who I wanted to play Nellie, immediately Christina popped into my head. And it's funny because, like, I mean, Christina and I hadn't really spoken in a very long time. I mean, we generally sort of stayed in touch, peripherally, but we hadn't really talked in a long time. But I'd always in the back of my head thought, "Oh, I'd really love to do something with Christina again." Because because of that period of time of growth and of learning together, about acting and about theater and about making these big choices. So I don't know, Christina, I'd love to hear sort of you talk a little bit about your process with this and your thoughts on making these big choices, because this was a big, I mean, you had to do a lot of big stuff in this too.
You absolutely crushed it too. It's so
Absolutely, man.
As you
Completely
always
haunting.
do.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I was working with Graham, so, and I knew I had to deal with the deleterian, I had to really match up. When I met the deleterian, I was terrified, running from it, quite literally for my life. I think is when I met him. Yeah, no, I mean, I think the email that I was looking back through it when we were doing this Q&A, was basically like, "Hey, Christina, haven't talked to you in a while, but I just feel like you'd be into this. And I think actually, like, you're kind of into this kind of indie game, but also you're game for things." And I think that's when I was just like, yeah, I am pretty game for stuff. But I think joking aside, like that does sort of, that is kind of part of why movies like this work. I think for me in particular is there is no time to be afraid to do something or to like second guess yourself. You have to be pretty fearless when you work this fast. And I worked on projects that were slower or bigger budget or whatever, like all the mess that films can be. And I guess I would say it was actually sort of, again, it felt very like it harkened back to college and the time when it was just actually about the experience of getting from A to B, not necessarily what it would be like to watch it or how. I mean, I know Graham was thinking about all of that at the same time, which is sort of a miracle that he was able to do all those things at the same time. But I was able to just go in there and like do whatever he asked me to do. I mean, I would have done anything. He hosted me in his house. He got me all the microwave meals I could ask for. It was a dream.
Luxury.
But it was actually really fun. It was also just such a small set, especially with Ken. We felt so taken care of. And I felt like it was such a trusting set that there was never, I mean, it was like me alone in the middle of nowhere. I had no car, no way out, no self-service, with Graham and like two other dudes. And I was just like, okay, like what else? What can I do? Some more scary psycho face? I'll do it.
I also have to say, just you being pulled from a place that was obviously a happier plane of existence for you, and just how fucking over it you are to be back in this one, is just some of the most chilling work I've seen in anything this year. And really, really just, I have to give you so much credit for it completely. And also, working sort of, I don't know how bound necessarily you were to the area of the machine. You're kind of, almost in your little cage there. And also, Graham, before we go, I do want to talk about the design of the ghost machine itself, because obviously it's important enough to be, in the title. It's an iconic design to me, and I'd love to know the process of how you put it together, and Christina, how you kind of interacted with it on set, which I assume it was there for you to do.
Yeah. So real quickly, I realized that I never answered your question of what our shooting time was.
Right.
We shot the movie Principal in 6 days.
Amazing.
And plus another couple of days that Ken and I went out and shot some other random stuff together. And regarding the machine, and actually this is a great thing I think for Ken to comment on, because the in the script, it's written about the idea of flipping between black and white and color, and that there is a distinct change there tonally, because of my character being, obviously very lonely. I'm a lonely man. And but then when the ghost machine enters play, it brings light into my life, but it's this sort of sinister kind of presence. And so a major factor, I mean, when so Johnny O'Marrero designed and built the ghost machine, who we also all went to college with. This is a big Fordham University theater program reunion. But he built it, and the idea was I wanted it to feel very homegrown, wanted it to feel very, pieced together with PVC pipe, and it wasn't fancy. I didn't care how it worked. Like I had a couple people that read the script that were like, well, I want to know how the ghost machine works. Why does it work? How do you build it? And like I was completely unconcerned with all of that. That to me doesn't matter. It's a ghost machine. It works. It makes a ghost. That's what it does. And but then in terms of the actual presence of the machine, so much of it rode on the way that we shot it, and on the not just the color aspect of it, obviously being green and being this sort of sinister, kind of sickly, kind of deathly color, but also how it, over the course of the film, it sort of gets bigger, it sort of becomes more imposing, it sort of becomes a little bit more dangerous. And so Ken can probably talk even more about that, in terms of kind of how we have the machine in the world.
Yeah, I loved how in the script you could feel that part of Wozik's belief in this gave it its own power too. So when we got into that space and we saw how tight we were going to be working, it's like, okay, well, what are we going to be able to do with this big psychedelic, point? Like, how can we drive some of this? And Chris, thank you so much for the appreciation of black and white. Like for me, knowing that I was going to be coloring this meant that I could expose to hit those points.
Man, him flipping the switches on the machine and the color coming, it's just so masterful, man. Love it.
Green is meant to be so sickly, but to provide that touch of color that gives us, when we get into those flashbacks, those warmths that feel the character interaction. And that machine was so cool, just like the puppet. It's, they've mentioned a couple times that these individuals all went to school together. As a DP, one of my favorite things is putting a camera in the middle of a life, and they already had this connected life. And so I was just getting to walk a camera gracefully through these mistakes and these sad points and these highs and these lows. And it was honestly a huge, huge privilege.
Man, that's absolutely incredible. I really do feel like the history between all of you is one of the things that feeds how special the different pieces of the way all these things come together. It just feels like very, very natural to me. And this is a movie that I cannot wait to lay on our audience this weekend. And I do hope that you guys, if you have the freedom to do so, will be active on our Discord server. I know our fans are going to have a lot of questions to ask as well. So I'd love to put you guys and your incredible work kind of on a pedestal for them too. But is there anything else that you guys wanted to mention before we close things out for the night? I want to make sure I give everybody a chance to talk about absolutely everything. If anything else pops to mind,
I mean,
even if you don't think. Go ahead.
I just want to say, I haven't had the opportunity to sit here with everyone. Obviously, not everybody is here, but most of us. We had a very small crew.
Yeah.
And I just to everyone, thank you. This was obviously like a gigantic labor of love, and it wasn't always easy, and it wasn't always comfortable, and we had to deal with an army of June bugs that could have taken over the planet. But I'm very grateful, and I'm very grateful to V Channels Media who made this movie happen, and the amount of freedom that they gave me is really just unparalleled. And then finally, I just have to say, I still have my CFF tattoo that I got.
I love it. It's that's coming back this year. That tradition, mainline tattoo, had time this year, so they're going to come back and do that again. So bless you for being one of the a walking billboard for my crazy little festival that perhaps might is the little festival that might is a better way to describe it. I'm not sure. But it means the world to me to have you back, and honestly, any project you ever make has a home here. But we love you dearly, buddy. And whether you're a Godzilla expert or you're hitting us with, I think, one of the most just gorgeous pieces of work that, you know, people call us a horror film festival a lot, but I really love films that find a way to blend all the genres and the elements that I myself love. And your film just tiptoes through those tulips for me in a way that very few things have this year. So huge props to you and your crew. I love this movie a lot. Everybody, please take a chance on Graham's newest here during this week.